right, hello everybody. I'm going to give you an introduction to Project 5 today, an introduction to visualization. And this will be our last and final project, as you all know. And it is optional for those of you who have actually, got good marks and you feel that you don't have the time for it, you're welcome to not do it. But I do believe that you will have a lot of benefit in doing the project. It will be quite a nice project to do. And it's really not such a difficult project. I think of all the projects that you have to complete, this one is probably the most doable one of all of them. So what is this project all about? Okay, it's all about that we have done projects 1, 2, 3, 4, where we've done various things, And so in the end, what do we present to top management of a company or to people who are using your application? Very often, one of the main things that we want to present is the data. Companies have such a lot of data available to them. And if they don't know it and they don't see it, they can't use it. And there's a lot of hidden data lying in the databases, data stores, the Excel spreadsheets of any company. And this tool that we are going to be discussing here at Power BI is such an amazing tool to help us to actually visualize the data in a really nice way, make it interesting, and it will help processes and decision-making in organizations. So what is data visualization? Now, have a look at this lovely image that you see here. This is an example of combining different types of graphs. Here we see a bubble graph together with another type of graph, and we are looking at lines of code of programming languages. And you can see the one that is the largest is R because we are looking at CRAN packages. And then on the sides of the bubble, you'll see that is where those packages lie and links to it. And you can now also visualize, it shows us the lines of code. So, we can clearly see from this visual that in the blue blob that you see there, that R is the one with the most lines of code. And that's typical of any visualization that we actually would make use of. It must be something that you immediately can look at and see, I can see what I'm looking for. So it is the representation of data that lies somewhere. We are mapping data points in logical groups, like you can see. We compare them by looking at different colors, different sizes. We understand the context of each of these data points. And by looking at this graph, I can actually understand the information to be able to analyze it and make decisions. So yeah, we can do such a lot of, visualizations in this type of environment. And I'd just like to, for example, show you as an example. Here's a very nice visual that we can also look at. There is a site called Information is Beautiful, and I can recommend that you go and look at the site, and you'll find a lot of visuals here that are really very interesting. So what we are looking at here is data breaches. So if I scroll down, you can see I can now scroll down here. We can clearly see, that when this data is collected from 2004, we can see here that, the very first hack that we actually knew about was AOL, where you can see how many records were lost. There was some software engineer, you can have a read about it. And you can then have a look at all these different visuals by JP Morgan. And as we go up in time, we can see, that hacks have happened more and more. Here is Yahoo, with massive attack that happened there. There is another network finder that we don't know about today, spam bot. And so we go up, and here we see Facebook. Imagine how many records have been lost there, phone numbers, full names, and so forth. Yeah, so we can have a look at this visual and clearly see, how things have increased. And what you obviously can see from this visual is that we have a problem. And more hacks are happening that are successful, and massive amount of information has been stolen. And together with this, we can have a look at data sensitivity. So here we can see email addresses, personal details. Here we see bank credit cards, banking details, very sensitive information. You can see Marriott International, one of those banks, Adobe, health data, and then here all the data, Shanghai police. So you can clearly see from this visual what you need to see. You can clearly see what is not really a problem, and you can see how things change in time. Here we see lots of email addresses being stolen. So this is probably the most common thing that we find that is being stolen, and that can be used then in, those phishing attacks that normally happen. Okay, that is just sort of a general, that's not what we really be implementing. Let's have a look at an example. And here we can see we are looking at a Power BI dashboard. So this is, what we are looking at here, and we are looking at this is one of the nice ones. You can have a look on their website. There are many examples. Before you start with Practical 5, have a look at the examples and see what we can make use of. And so what we see here is we see a very integrated dashboard where we are looking here at, how much money has been spent over 2 years. We see the number of customers, we can see the average spend per customer and the number of campaigns that were run. And so now what we can see is, okay, we have different things like here we see wine. And so when I click on each of the categories, I can see that all the other little views that I'm looking at, the graphs, are changing. I can also see, like here, sweets, I can see the amount spent and so on. Here we can see, that we are selling things through stores, through the web, through catalogs, and we can each time see how the information changes. Here I can now look at my customers, by age and education. So you can see there is my age and there's now the colors, show, like, for example, let's look at the masters. Here we see the masters, people with masters who are 65. So now what I can see is now this really filters it down really nicely. And if I want to really look at something very specific, I can actually open this up and say, well, let me look down here. I want to see that, okay, let's have a look at it. There's somebody 939. Okay, so I select that and I go back. And my report now changes to say, well, those people are spending the most on wine. If I look at somebody up here, you can see that they are spending even more on wine. Yeah, so you can have it really shows a lot of good information. So that is what we are aiming for, is for us to be able to say, let's really look at, okay, this is by age group. You can see how things change per group. And so we are really looking at interesting information, and I can even filter here. Again, I can say, let me just look at Australia, what's happening in Australia, if I've got different offices, or if I want to look at, let's say, India, and you can see that. So the information, I can clear the filters there. Information is really presented really well, and everything is well integrated with each other. And as a manager, I can look at this and I can really understand what's happening in my organization, and I can make good decisions based on what I see. Okay, so that is what we are aiming for, that type of visualization based on the data that we will provide to you in an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so when we are creating this visualization, you have to know who your audience is. Okay, is it a group of students? Is it a group of just people out there? Or is it some corporate management? So you must know them, and you must know what they want, and you must know the level of detail that they want to see. And so then you have to choose your features to show the data properly. You have to know them. So there's a lot of different visuals that one can make use of, and you must understand exactly which visual will do what for me. And, if we choose the wrong visuals, it's really not going to help, and it may even distort the actual data that we are trying to convey. You must keep it very organized, coherent. You must make your visualization inclusive of all the aspects that must be there. Don't bias it into a certain viewpoint and let people understand things that they're not supposed to understand. And don't distort the data. Make sure that it's objective and that you really present the data as it is, and that you don't bias it in some way. So what is a guide of good data visualization? Is identify your audience first of all, and then make sure your data is clean. I'm going to talk about that now. That's one of the major important steps that we need to do, is to ensure that our data is what we want it to be. Select the right chart, label it, emphasize the important points, choose the best dashboard, format your charts for accessibility, make use of color, ensure your data is readable and accept feedback. So help people, get people to help you. And, you know, it's not always simple to do this. And it takes time, and it actually takes a lot of practice to know how to do this properly. But let's go back to, you know, we are not artists, most of us, and we struggle sometimes. So go and browse on the internet to get ideas. For example, here's something called Dribbble. And here I've just entered a search term dashboard Power BI. And so here I can have a look at examples. So look at this one. It's, you know, and the reason why we do this is just to get ideas, on how to structure our different visuals. What is the spacing that we need to create? Like you can have a look at this one here, which is very nice. Look at this one here. You can see a lot of really good ideas. And there are also templates that one can make use of. You can go and find templates that are really nice. Here's another one. You can see this is called FreePick. And again, I've just selected Power BI dashboards. Here's a lot of examples, you know, so you look at how nice this one looks. We have on the side, we've got some options that we can select. This is a very nice visual. Yeah, so I suggest that before you start, decide on a color scheme, decide on how you want to present it, because that does make a massive difference to how the data will be conveyed. This is a very nice visual, very clearly showing all the different aspects that one wants to look at. Right, so ensure that you actually do go and select a nice color scheme, even a template, and make sure that your dashboard looks really good. So what do we mean by cleaning data? So there's an option called Power Query, and when you look at your data, you now have to look at it, and it's not to say like it's a relational database we give you where everything has got entity, referential integrity, and everything is set up well. It could be that you get some Excel spreadsheets and you get some really, you know, disconnected data that you have to fix up. So you need to look at things like the following, that the column headers must be in the first row. Sometimes column headers can be somewhere else. There could be open rows between the header and the data. And you must make sure that you have a header, and immediately after that starts the data and it's in the right place. And sometimes you can rename the names of the actual columns, because these names are going to go on your reports. Any columns that you know that you are not going to be needing, you can take them away. You are just working here with a data set that is used in the tool, but their underlying data set will actually, the original data set will not be affected. You know, you can unpivot columns. Sometimes that means that, you know, you can change something from being a column into a row if it's going to actually become more, make contribution to your data. You can pivot columns. So, for example, creating an aggregate value of certain rows where you are doing some counts or things. You can replace values, like sometimes things are misspelled. You know, somebody entered data without really checking any of the values. And some of the, let's say, product names aren't always the same. You can go through the data and make sure that everything is the same. Replacing null values, removing any duplicates that may be happening in your data. Making sure that everything is of the right data type. Format values, you know, like fields can be made currency, or whatever, you know, changing the format of the date types and whatever you can do there, like you normally would, or even combining tables for querying. So, you know, you are going to be presented with a data set, and you need to make sure that you actually go through the data and that you fix it up. So that's an important part of being a business, doing this BI type of work. And it's important to make sure your data is in the right format without any errors. So let's have a look at the power of visualization. So what we are looking at here, this is called the Earth is breathing. But what we are looking at is how over the seasons, over the whole of the world, how it's a beautiful visualization. And, you know, if you look at, for example, at South Africa, we can clearly see certain parts of South Africa never become green. There's not much vegetation there. But if you look at like South America, you can see a lot of green there. But if you look at Europe, you can see how Europe becomes green and then becomes dry. Yeah, so this is, you know, the power of visualization. We can clearly see what is going on, and it's very simple and easy. Within a minute or two, you really have a good understanding of what is going on in the data. Another good visualization to look at, for example, is here is the difference between movie critics, what they thought of a movie and what the actual audience liked. And this was on Rotten Tomatoes. And what we can see, which is quite interesting here, is that here is a movie called The Last Jedi. And this is the biggest budget movie with the most dramatic split between the critics and the audience opinion. So you can see down here, the audience here on the right, the audience really hates. So in other words, the critics probably loved this and the audience hated it. Of all the bubbles on the screen, this one is the largest. So if you go here to this one, like The Gift or Boyhood, you can see there was a lot of overlap in opinion. Everyone agreed. But if you go to this side, you'll see that there's a big difference. So yeah, so it's interesting that you can, in a really clever visual, you can very quickly see what is going on. And just always a question is, what is the difference between doing data analytics, business intelligence and data science? What is the main difference here? And yeah, so I think everybody knows this, but a data scientist is very often somebody that is dealing with a number of data operations, and there's a lot of data procedures lying under the whole process, and you can handle both structured and unstructured data. But very importantly, you must know things like mathematics, statistics, machine learning algorithms, and you'll be using things like SAS, Python, R, TensorFlow, Hadoop, Spark. Yeah, so it's a lot of machine learning that is going on here and a lot of flexibility. Whereas a data analyst is somebody, that is more looking at the cleaning of the data, transforming the data and generating inferences of the data. And this is typically what we'll be doing here. We are looking at small data set and statistic inferences. We are using structured data like an Excel spreadsheet or a database. We have problem-solving skills, knowledge, and basic statistic knowledge that we require. And we know basic Excel, SQL, or in some cases, things like Tableau. So yeah, so that is, clearly the difference between the two. Both are needed. And for both of these types of jobs, there's a lot of scope in industry. And if you are looking at more machine learning, you can, for example, have a look at GitHub. And here on GitHub, there are lots of, there's a link here for machine learning samples. And these are all in for C#. So that's quite a nice link to look at and to see what you can make use of here and include in your applications that you're writing. Right, so what we're now going to be looking at is how we actually make use of Power BI with a small example. Now, the first thing that you have to do is you actually have to go and install Power BI. So I just have to find my Power BI. Just go here. So I go to the Microsoft Store. And so this is where you'll find Power BI. And you can then open it and you can install Power BI from here. Right, so I've already done that. As I say, get data. So it will open up this view for me. And you can see that here a lot of different types of sources are listed, like an Excel spreadsheet, JSON, PDF files, databases of various kinds. Yeah, so if we scroll down here, Azure, SharePoint, anything that you can really think of is available here for you to then incorporate into your Power BI. Okay, but for our purposes, we are only going to make use of a small little Excel workbook for now, and I'm going to say connect. Here is my dry food sales little Excel spreadsheet, which I now am loading. Okay, so I have it in front of me here. So if your spreadsheet has got a number of sheets, you will have to check all of them. For us, we are just going to be checking one of them. And it now displays the data. So what am I looking at? I have a few columns there. I have a few stores. They are mainly Joburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, that are selling different products at prices which may vary on different dates. So then this is basically purchasing products on different dates from different stores. So the first thing that we mentioned is we must clean our data, and we can click on transform data as an option for us to do that. So here we see the transform data view that is opening, and it's called here Power Query Editor. When I look through this, you'll see that, I can do many things here. You can see I can add new sources, I can enter data, I can change some parameters, columns, there's a lot of options available here. Here is transform, I can change if the first row is not the header, I can add it in here. I can do pivoting, splitting columns. If you split columns, you can change it according to certain criteria and so on. But for now, all that I want to do is the date is not really a good name for a header. I want to change the date by using the rename option, and I'm going to be calling this date. Date purchased, which is much more meaningful and will be displaying much better on my spreadsheet, my workbook. And now basically, not my workbook, my Power BI dashboard report. And so what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at all the steps that I've applied. I can see them here and I can also remove them as I wish. So you have a good track of what you are doing here. And I can now return and I can then say close and apply, and that change will now be incorporated into my data set that I'm viewing in Power BI. Right, so now I'm going to start looking at the options that are available here. So here on the side, we see these three options. This is the report view that I'm now looking at here. Then I have my table view. And this is now where I can see I've got the date purchased there. And this is then the view of all the data that I am looking at here. You can sort it if you want to, and you can see all the different options that are available in terms of products. And then we have the model view, and this is essentially where we have if you have linked sheets that are linked according to some fields, you'll see them all here. But for our purposes, we are going to start off with building visuals. So if I want to build a visual, what I'm looking at is I'm looking here at the sheet, looking there at the sheet, and I'm basically going to say, what do I want to do with my data? So one of the options that I want to see basically is I want to see that, I've got all these products. So let's look at our data again. I've got all these products and all these stores, and I want to, just find out where must I buy which store will be the cheapest? If I've got different prices, because not all the you can see there, the canned vegetables are not all the same price. So what I essentially want to work out is where is the place that will sell the cheapest products to me. So therefore, what I now need to look at is I want to go and find out for the stores, I want to look at the price. Okay, so what I see is when I select the two fields over here, I see a visual opening here, but it is not really displaying any graph at any point in time. I'm just looking here and looking at this is a store and this is the sum. And you can looking at the sum of the price. In other words, Cape Town sells a number of things, and this is now the sum of those products. And now I can decide, okay, let me now choose my visualization. So I can, for example, say, I can use that one, or I can use that one. I can use that one. They essentially, but I would imagine that this one would be the most, practical one to use. This is then, and now what you can see is this is called a stacked column chart. I think it's important that we know that, if I, for example, choose this one, it's really not going to be very helpful. It gives you information, but many of these things, as you go through them, that doesn't mean anything. You must then make sure that you do, this could help, but you must make sure that you understand what it is you want to display and that you are using the most helpful view of the views that are available. Okay, so there I have my view, and as I click on them, you can see that I can then be looking at certain aspects of this view. What I now can do is to make it more interesting, I can look at my options of changing the theme. So I can say, well, let me choose that one there, or I can choose perhaps this one here that looks a bit busy. So yeah, various options that you can make use of depending on your clients, the people looking at it. And yeah, we'll just keep to that. So yeah, it all depends on and just this is something you must do very carefully. Look at examples and make sure you do it well, because it does impact your report quite a lot. So that is the first report. So what I now clearly can see is that Joburg is my cheapest location, where based on all the prices of all the products, I'm going to get the best bargain there. And you can see there's not much of a difference, but Cape Town is the most expensive. Okay, so what we now want to do is we now want to drill down even more into our data. And so what we now want to do, so Joburg is the cheapest place, but is it true for all the products? Is it for, if I want to only buy one product, will I just go to Joburg, or do I need to go to another place? So what I'm now going to be looking at is I'm going to now start a new visual. So I just click on anywhere outside, and I'm now going to say that I'm going to select the product. Okay, so I want to now select which product. I'm going to select the price, and I'm going to select the store. So what I now want to determine is, like bottled water in Cape Town, as you can see, there is a certain price. Okay, so now we can again go and, for example, we can have a look at this visual here. So I can, move it over here, can make it larger. And yeah, that perhaps is not the nicest coloring scheme that I've seen there. So I can perhaps change it into something like that. Right, so what I now can see is if I want to buy rice, you can see that I'm looking here at rice is there and there and there. But, the question is this the best visual? So is it really helping me to see, when I'm looking at rice, I can see, that is Cape Town, that is Johannesburg, and that is Pretoria. But can I really see which one is the better one? I don't really think so. So now let's have a look at some of the other visuals. Okay, so this one probably, yeah, this one would help me, because when I now look at this one, I can clearly see that, okay, this is obviously the most expensive place for rice. And in the end here, we see that Pretoria, if I just want to buy rice, then this is going to be my better option. Right, so there I have my two visuals. So I've now taken a very, very basic workbook with a little bit of information, and I can now resize my two visuals, make them, play around with it a bit. I've got my two visuals, and then I can just make sure they are aligned with each other. And if I, for example, look at this one, you can perhaps say that I want to add some labels to it. But what I can, for example, do here is I'm busy on my visual, and I can say, well, I want to change some options. So I want to add perhaps data labels. And you can see that it's now adding some data labels if you want to do that. If I look at general, here you can see I can change some things on the main screen, the title, and so on. So you can actually go and update quite a number of things here. Yeah, what else can we do here? Yeah, I think basically, yeah, that's basically, and you can see how your visuals are interrelated to each other, how they interact, which is really nice. Yeah, and a number of options have now been demonstrated, which I think, is sufficient. And you can also, yeah, if we look at, yeah, we haven't looked at, if we look at here at price, for example, yeah, I haven't looked at the date one, so sometimes we can also look at, if we look at a visual that has like a date in, you can then configure, are you looking at the day, month, year? Which of those are you looking at? Are you looking at quarters? So there are many options that one can be considering in terms of this. So this is just a good starter for you to get going and, make a really nice dashboard that is well integrated, where yeah, like I showed you in the one, you can set up filters that filter throughout your whole report on all the visuals that you have. Choose the right graphs, the right coloring, the right formatting. So I hope this has been helpful, and I think that there's a lot of videos out there that will help you with designing a really nice Power BI dashboard for your project. So